runs. Honestly, though, there's no way! There's no way! How in the fuck?
But no portion of any FNAF game has the potential to reflect this as much as the Custom Nights. Custom Nights have been a staple of Five Nights at Freddy's since its inception, being first included as the 7th and final night of the original game. The difficulty of the animatronics was based on a number scale ranging from 0 to 20, with 0 being completely inactive and 20 being as aggressive as possible. Naturally, players of the game seeking a challenge would immediately gravitate towards the hardest possible difficulty, and with that, 420 mode was born. In this video, I'm going to briefly explore the history of the first 3 games' Custom Night challenges, how their strategies evolved over the years, and how eventually they became completely broken. Before we get to the video, I'm excited to announce today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has something for everyone. Collect over 700 unique champions, join one of 15 unique factions, test your skill. The original 420 mode from FNAF 1 is often regarded as one of the easiest of the series' challenges. However, back in 2014, this challenge was seen as near impossible, and actually impossible by the game's own developer. However, a strategy was quickly formed that streamlined the gameplay to make its completion a possibility. Check the left and right doors for Bonnie and Chica, check Pirate's Cove for Foxy, close the right door between camera checks to avoid Freddy, rinse and repeat. It sounds easy on paper, but in execution, the required precision was brutal. After the strategy was developed, it was only a matter of time before someone would have the first successful run. But how long would that take? A few weeks? A month? More? Well, if you didn't already know, you may be thoroughly surprised to learn that it was completed less than 2 weeks following the game's release. The person who would be the first to overcome the challenge goes by the name Big Bug. Although they've been inactive for a very long time, thankfully their completion and even the full stream VOD are archived. Let's take a listen.
Okay, crunch time. 5 AM at 4%. It's more like 4.5, actually. This might be the run, provided Foxy won't attack. No, I don't have an idea. 1%. Foxy, please. Yes! 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 Oh! Sorry guys, we did it! Oh my god! Oh, I can't believe it! It's done!
After that resounding victory, Markiplier would upload his iconic completion the very next day, which is how most people really found out about the challenge.
Oh my god! Oh, I did it! Ah, I did it!
Now, you may have been wondering in the back of your mind why I said this just a bit ago. 420 mode from FNAF 1 is often regarded as one of the easiest of the series' challenges. Well, this is because we now have a much easier strategy that trivializes this challenge. Allow me to explain. So, there are 3 crucial mechanics that were either unknown or ignored when this challenge was first partaken. Number 1, Foxy is stalled by any use of the camera, not just Pirate Cove. Number 2, Freddy is also stalled by use of the camera, but only if you're watching him directly. Since he's so aggressive in this mode, the only reasonable way to utilize this is on Cam 4B, when he's 1 step from getting to you. Number 3, Chica also inhabits Cam 4B, but her sprite overrides Freddy's if she's present, which means you should always know if she's going to approach the right door without checking the light. With these 3 key details acknowledged, a new strategy emerges. Turning on the light and checking Cam 4B twice to stall Freddy without closing the right door, and repeating the process until Chica seems to have showed up and gone from the corner. Once this happens, you do check the right door. If Chica appears, close it. Once she leaves, which should be rather quickly, simply repeat the process. Since Foxy is being stalled constantly, it is overwhelmingly likely that he will only show up to the left door once in a night. In order to know what stage he's on, you should use certain opportunities when the right door must be closed for Chica anyways to check on Pirate's Cove and quickly return to performing the previous cycle. Once you get to about 4% power, if you even get that low, you should stall the rest of the night out by doing absolutely nothing and just pray. The main issue the older strategy had that this one corrects was that running out of power around 4 or 5 AM was rather common and almost up to chance depending on interactions with Bonnie, Chica, and sometimes even Foxy, who drains 6% power if he arrives a second time.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm getting shot.
These ideas could even be taken to a further extreme. You see, in Five Nights at Freddy's, the animatronics move on intervals. These intervals determine how often animatronics can partake in a movement opportunity. If you didn't know, even nights 1 through 6 actually utilize the 0 through 20 scale for animatronic difficulty. However, the numbers change over the course of the night and never get nearly as high as 20. The number assigned to an animatronic determines its chance to move during an interval because the game rolls a random number from 1 to 20 and then compares it to that assigned difficulty value. Since the number the game attempts to generate could never exceed the assigned value if that value were set to 20, this means that an animatronic on 20 difficulty always moves on its interval except for when it is stalled in cases of Freddy and Foxy. Once you learn and fully understand these intervals, you can essentially gain a complete mastery over Five Nights at Freddy's mechanics. With that, I want to introduce you to Shooter25, a FNAF YouTuber who specializes in completing difficult FNAF and FNAF fan game challenges. On February 5th, 2022, he uploaded a FNAF 1 420 mode green run. A green run is essentially a run in which you try to finish with as much power remaining as possible or another appropriately assigned resource. How much power did he finish with, you might be asking? Well, let's find out. Right off the bat, you can tell that Shooter's utilization of the camera's lights and doors is going to be kept to an absolute minimum. Because of his understanding of Bonnie's interval, he even flips the camera up while he's there and then closes the door because he knows that nothing could possibly happen to him. It's honestly kind of hilarious how little he has to do to complete Five Nights at Freddy's 1's hardest possible challenge. Foxy never even has a chance to show up to the left door for the entire night because he makes sure to open the cameras on the interval right before his movement opportunity can even happen. Chica only attacks a handful of times throughout the night, and by 6 AM, he has 26% power left.
No.
Yes.
Oh, shoot.
I thought it was like 26.5 or something.
I think it's 6.5.
I think that's my record.
Yeah.
I'm sure most of you assumed that completing 420 mode with that much power left was just impossible. However, you may not believe me, but it's even worse. You know how Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica can only kill you if you use the cameras? Obviously, Foxy is put in place to prevent you from just sitting in the office and stalling everyone, but there's a certain quirk in the way that he functions that can be heavily, and I mean heavily, exploited. A user named Leftori invented a strategy based on this exploit. When Foxy leaves Pirate Cove, which is basically guaranteed on 420 mode after 15 seconds, a timer starts counting up every frame if you don't check the hall where you see him running. When it gets to 1500, Foxy spawns at your door. Generally, at 60 FPS, this would be about 25 seconds, which is the figure that most people understand. But what would happen if we could somehow use a third-party program to alter the game's frame rate? Well, since the timer for the night counts seconds and not frames, you can beat Five Nights at Freddy's 420 mode without doing a single thing, as long as you manually set your FPS to 2 or 1. And that is how FNAF 1's 420 mode was completely broken. We know now that FNAF 1's challenge was only the first of many, and the trend would continue with the release of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 just a few months later. Compared to the previous game, this game had almost 3 times as many animatronics to deal with. Because of this, the game was inherently more difficult than its predecessor, and even to this day has a negative reputation because of its hectic and often seemingly unfair nature on harder difficulties. Before we dive into this game's 1020 mode, I do want to clarify a few things about the mechanics. This game uses the 0 to 20 number scale in the same way as the first to determine movement opportunities, and also has its own set of intervals. Even though it's called 1020 mode, you're really dealing with 11 characters, and 13 if you want to get super technical. But all of the main threats can be separated into 3 categories: desk animatronics, vent animatronics, and what I like to call wildcards. Desk animatronics are the ones that trigger blackouts when they enter the office and stand by your desk. It's important to note that these animatronics actually force your camera down after a certain amount of time, so you can't just stall their interactions by hiding in the camera. Vent animatronics are the ones that show up to the vent opening but leave after you put the mask on. And the wildcards are those that don't neatly fit into either category. Golden Freddy is a bit of a strange case, certainly a wildcard, but he doesn't usually pose much of a problem. Foxy and the Puppet are obvious wildcards in that they have mechanics that are solely dedicated to them, but you might not expect that Toy Bonnie is actually a wildcard as well. He's not quite an office animatronic or a vent animatronic. He shows up to the vent, but then enters the office briefly after the mask is put on. The problem with Toy Bonnie is that he will sometimes take longer to perform his attack than he otherwise would. Essentially, he is a massive RNG-based liability and just an asshole. The reason why he's such a liability is because of the music box. The music box winds down faster as the nights progress, and since the Puppet cannot be customized on night 7, the music box is at its fastest speed, regardless of the difficulty of the other characters. With all of the mechanical context out of the way, what strategy did the community come up with? It went sort of like this. You'd prioritize winding the music box as much as possible until an office animatronic forced your camera down. Then you'd put the mask on, check both vent lights, and flash Foxy, and then rinse and repeat. Although I did really oversimplify it. This game is hard. Oh look, it's FNAF, one of the pioneers of the 1020 strategy, makes this look easy. But in reality, he needed 103 attempts for the successful run. There are a lot of circumstances in which your rhythm is thrown off, and a less skilled player would panic and fall apart instantly. He even made a separate video showing off many of his failed attempts. While he was attempting 1020 mode, he made a Reddit post that he would frequently edit with his discoveries. And I'd like to add a quote from this post that really shows how much of an issue Toy Bonnie is in this challenge. Toy Bonnie is the biggest bitch in the game. He sits in the right vent for a couple seconds. If you look at the cameras, he'll probably jump out at you. If you put the mask on and watch him crawl by, your music box will be unwound the hell up. Flash your lights a bit before trying to rewind, or Foxy will probably get you. And despite all of this, on November 13th, 2014, just 2 days after the release of the game, Oh Look, It's FNAF would upload his completion of 1020 mode. He even received a personal congratulations from Scott Cawthon, and the community praised him as a legend. Now, fast forward 5 years. In September of 2019, DJ Sterf, a prominent FNAF community member, uploaded an over hour-long guide on 1020 mode. At this point, the intervals were now considered portions of the strategy, and the comprehension level of the game had noticeably increased. However, he would outdate his own strategy 2 years later with an even longer guide video. The new strategy, pioneered by a handful of the community's smartest contributors, was more reliable and had players winning easier and more often. Allow me to introduce to you the right vent camp strat. The video begins by setting the stage with some extra clarification on game mechanics and knowledge. Though I won't go quite as in-depth as he does, I will be pointing out the essentials for you guys. For context, despite being called 1020 mode, in reality, every character in the game actually has their difficulty capped under 20. The night lasts for 420 seconds, and most of the game's characters have movement opportunities on 5-second intervals. However, the game's forced blackouts by desk animatronics I described earlier, and Foxy's attack opportunities both operate on 10-second intervals. This means there are 84 minor intervals and 42 major intervals in a night. Since blackouts force the player to don the mask anyways, anything in the left vent will simply go away. Often you also have to wind the music box for a specific amount of time, and if you're too greedy, you'll get off of this cycle. It cannot be stressed how important it is to stay on it. The biggest wrench in this strategy, as expected, is Toy Bonnie. When Toy Bonnie arrives at the right vent after the mask is put on, he has a 50% chance every 0.5 seconds to begin his blackout phase, if there's no other animatronic waiting to attack after him. Since the game doesn't allow a simultaneous attack from any given desk animatronic and Toy Bonnie, and the nature of 1020 basically guarantees an animatronic is always in queue to attack afterwards, the circumstance changes. Rather than 50% every half a second, it's 33.3% every whole second. This means that instead of having to wait 1 second on average, it's 3, including the 5 seconds of the attack itself. Although the chance is remarkably low, it is possible that Toy Bonnie could stall for the entire length of a fully wound music box, which is 16.67 seconds. Of course, this is assuming that you have a full music box at any given time, and assuming Foxy wouldn't have killed you already. There is an entire other set of hypothetical strategies that are used when you are slightly out of phase relative to the interval that you want to be on, but it basically all boils down to trying to get back in phase as soon as possible, as it is significantly less comfortable to be out of that cycle. Although I have grossly oversimplified this strategy, I believe that is the gist of it. A few months later, Shooter 25, who I mentioned earlier, would take this strategy to an actually rather logical next step. If the gameplay is so heavily based on intervals that are rather even, why not just use a timer? You might be wondering, why does this work any better? Well, let me quote from the description of his video. Foxy's usual killing opportunity is every